The veteran rancher gave them shelter. By morning, only his boots were left by the fire. When the sun rose that morning, the campfire was nothing but cold ashes. A pair of weathered leather boots stood perfectly positioned beside the dying embers, as if their owner had simply vanished into the desert air. The three strangers who had sought shelter the night before were gone, leaving behind only questions that would haunt the territory for decades to come. But to understand what happened in those final hours, we must go back to where it all began. The drought of 1879 had been merciless. Across the vast expanse of Arizona territory, cattle lay dead in dried creek beds, their bones bleaching white under the relentless sun. Towns that had thrived on the promise of silver and gold were becoming ghost towns, their inhabitants fleeing east toward more forgiving lands. Yet Samuel Garrett remained. At 62, Samuel had seen the territory transform from Apache hunting grounds to scattered settlements, from lawless frontier to something resembling civilization. His weathered face told the story of countless seasons, each line carved by wind, sun, and the weight of decisions that had kept him alive when so many others had perished. The Broken Arrow Ranch had been his life's work, 1,500 acres of stubborn land that he had wrested from the desert through sheer determination and blood. The ranch house sat like a fortress against the harsh landscape, its adobe walls thick enough to stop bullets, its windows positioned to provide clear sight lines across the surrounding terrain. Samuel had built it himself, brick by brick, after losing his first home to a Comanche raid 20 years earlier. Every nail, every beam, every carefully placed stone reflected a man who understood that survival meant thinking 3 steps ahead of death. The morning of September 15th started like any other. Samuel emerged from the house as the sky began to lighten, his movements deliberate despite the stiffness in his joints. His routine never varied. Check the well, inspect the corral, count the remaining cattle. The drought had reduced his herd from 300 head to barely 50, but these survivors were the strongest, the ones that might make it through another season if the rains ever came. As he walked toward the barn, something caught his eye on the distant ridge. 3 figures on horseback, moving slowly against the horizon. In this territory, strangers meant trouble more often than not. Samuel's hand instinctively moved to the Colt 45 at his hip, a weapon that had saved his life more times than he cared to remember. The riders approached with the easy confidence of men who feared little. Their leader was tall and lean, with the pale eyes of a predator, and a smile that never quite reached those eyes. His companions flanked him like wolves, their hands resting casually on their weapons. They wore the dust of hard travel, but their gear was too fine for common drifters. "Morning, mister," the leader called out, touching the brim of his hat with mock courtesy. "Name's Jack Morrison. These here are my associates, Cole and Dutch. We've been riding hard for 2 days straight. Wonder if we might trouble you for some water for our horses." Samuel studied them carefully. Morrison's accent carried traces of education, but there was something else beneath it, something that spoke of violence held in check. The other 2 said nothing, but their eyes constantly scanned the ranch, cataloging everything they saw. "Water's scarce these days," Samuel replied, his voice steady. "But I reckon I can spare some for the horses. There's a trough by the corral." As the 3 men dismounted, Samuel noticed details that set his instincts on edge. Morrison's boots were expensive, hand-tooled leather that cost more than most men earned in a month. Cole wore a shoulder holster beneath his vest, an unusual choice for a cowboy. Dutch had the nervous energy of a man accustomed to violence, his fingers drumming constantly against his thigh. "Much obliged," Morrison said, leading his horse to the trough. "Beautiful spread you have here. Must take a lot of work to keep it running, especially with times being what they are." "I manage," Samuel replied, positioning himself so he could watch all 3 men simultaneously. Morrison's smile widened. "I bet you do. Takes a special kind of man to make it out here on his own. Most folks would have packed up and headed back east by now." The conversation continued as the horses drank, but Samuel caught the subtle signals passing between the 3 strangers. Cole's slight nod toward the barn, Dutch's quick glance at the house, Morrison's casual survey of the surrounding terrain. These weren't travelers seeking assistance. They were predators evaluating their prey. "You know," Morrison said, stroking his horse's neck, "we heard tell in Tombstone that the Broken Arrow was run by a man who knew how to handle himself. Samuel Garrett, wasn't it? The same Sam Garrett who tracked down the Mendoza brothers back in '68? Samuel's expression didn't change, but internally, alarms began ringing. The Mendoza incident wasn't common knowledge. It had been a bloody affair, settled far from civilization, with no witnesses, except the dead. Only certain kinds of men would know about it. Don't know what you're talking about, Samuel said quietly. Morrison's laugh was cold. Come now, Mr. Garrett. No need for modesty among professionals. We're all in the same line of work, after all. The mask was dropping now. Morrison's easy manner was giving way to something harder, more predatory. Cole and Dutch had finished with the horses and were spreading out, creating a triangle with Samuel at the center. What line of work would that be? Samuel asked, though he already knew the answer. The kind that pays well and doesn't ask too many questions, Morrison replied. See, we've got a proposition for you. There's a job coming up, something that requires a man with your particular skills. The pay would be enough to get you through this drought and then some. Samuel had heard enough. These were killers, probably hired guns looking to recruit him for some bloody venture. He had left that life behind long ago, but it seemed the past was determined to catch up with him. Not interested, he said firmly. Morrison's smile vanished entirely. That's unfortunate. You see, we weren't really asking. We need someone with your reputation to lend credibility to our operation. The alternative is that we handle this the hard way. The threat hung in the air like the smell of distant gunpowder. Samuel felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the heightened awareness that came before violence. He had hoped those days were behind him, but the territory had its own way of settling old debts. I said I'm not interested, Samuel repeated, his hand moving closer to his weapon. Morrison sighed theatrically. Dutch, Cole, I think Mr. Garrett needs some convincing. The two men began to spread out further, their intent clear. Samuel calculated angles, distances, cover. The barn was 20 feet to his left, the house 30 feet behind him. 3 against 1, but he had the advantage of knowing the terrain. Before you boys do something you'll regret, Samuel said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had faced death and won. You should know that Marshal Williams is expected here this afternoon. He's bringing deputies from Tucson to discuss some cattle rustling in the area. It was a lie, but a convincing one. Morrison's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The smart play would be to leave, to find an easier target. But Samuel could see the calculation in Morrison's face, the weighing of risk against reward. You're bluffing, Morrison said finally. Maybe, Samuel replied. But are you willing to bet your life on it? The standoff stretched on, tension building like storm clouds on the horizon. Samuel knew that once this turned violent, there would be no going back. These men wouldn't leave him alive, not after what they had revealed about their intentions. Morrison made his decision. Kill him. The words had barely left his mouth when Samuel moved. 40 years of frontier life had taught him that hesitation was death. His coat cleared leather as he threw himself sideways, seeking the cover of a wooden water barrel. Dutch was fast, but not fast enough. Samuel's first shot caught him center mass, spinning him around before he could draw his weapon. Cole managed to get his gun out, but his shot went wide as Samuel's second bullet found its mark in his shoulder. Morrison had taken cover behind his horse, using the animal as a shield while he returned fire. Samuel could hear the bullets splintering the wood around him, feel the splinters stinging his cheek. He had 2 shots left in the cylinder, and Morrison was a careful man who wouldn't expose himself unnecessarily. The gunfight lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. Samuel used every trick he had learned in decades of violent encounters, changing positions, using the terrain to his advantage, making every shot count. When the smoke cleared, Dutch was dead, Cole was wounded and surrendering, and Morrison was nowhere to be seen. Samuel reloaded quickly, his eyes scanning for any sign of the third man. Morrison's horse was still there, but the man himself had vanished. Samuel knew better than to assume he had run. Men like Morrison didn't abandon their partners, especially not when there was unfinished business. The wounded Cole was propped against the water trough, blood seeping through his shirt. He's circling around, he gasped. Morrison, don't give up easy. Samuel nodded grimly. He had expected as much. Morrison would try to get behind him, probably using the barn or the house for cover. The question was whether he would wait for dark or risk a daylight assault. Why did you come here? Samuel asked Cole, as he bandaged the man's wound. Cole winced as the cloth tightened. Morrison heard about a job. Big money. Something about stopping a railroad survey. He needed someone with a reputation. Someone the other side would respect. And you thought I'd be interested? Morrison did. Said you were the kind of man who understood that survival meant taking opportunities when they came. Cole coughed, specks of blood appearing on his lips. Guess he was wrong. Samuel finished the bandaging and helped Cole to a more comfortable position. How long have you been riding with Morrison? 6 months, maybe 7. Met him in El Paso after the Rangers ran me out of Texas. He promised easy money and protection. Should have known better. The sound of breaking glass came from the direction of the house. Morrison had made his move, probably trying to get inside where he could control the situation. Samuel left Cole by the trough and began moving toward the house, using the corral fence for cover. The ranch house had been built for defense, but Samuel knew every weakness in its construction. Morrison would have to enter through the front door or one of the windows, and both approaches would leave him exposed. The question was whether he realized this or was desperate enough to risk it anyway. Samuel reached the corner of the house and paused, listening. Inside, he could hear careful footsteps, the sound of someone moving through rooms they didn't know. Morrison was being methodical, probably looking for another way out or a position that would give him an advantage. The front door was slightly ajar, moving gently in the desert breeze. Samuel considered his options. He could wait for Morrison to emerge, but that gave the man time to set up an ambush. He could try to flush him out, but that meant exposing himself to return fire. Or he could use his knowledge of the house's layout to his advantage. Samuel moved to the rear of the house, where a small window provided access to his bedroom. He had used this entrance before during Apache raids, when the front door was too dangerous. The window was narrow, but he could manage it if he was careful. Inside, the house was dim and quiet. Samuel moved through the rooms like a ghost, his boots silent on the wooden floors. He could hear Morrison in the main room, probably positioning himself near the front window where he could watch the yard. The floorboard beneath Samuel's left foot creaked softly. He froze, knowing that Morrison would have heard the sound. Sure enough, footsteps began moving in his direction, cautious but determined. Samuel positioned himself behind the doorway to the kitchen, his gun ready. Morrison appeared in the hallway, moving with the fluid grace of a professional killer. But Samuel had the advantage of surprise and familiarity with the terrain. "Morrison!" Samuel called out. The man spun toward the sound, his gun coming up fast. But Samuel was already moving, his shot taking Morrison in the chest before the man could return fire. Morrison staggered backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. "Should have taken my advice," Samuel said, approaching the wounded man. "Should have ridden away when you had the chance." Morrison coughed, blood staining his lips. "You don't understand. This was bigger than just a job. There are people who won't forget what happened here. Then they can join you," Samuel replied coldly. Morrison's eyes widened, perhaps realizing for the first time that he was going to die. "Wait, I can tell you things. Names, places, money hidden in banks across the territory. You could disappear, start over somewhere else." Samuel shook his head. "I'm already where I want to be." Morrison died with his secrets, leaving Samuel alone with the consequences of the day's violence. He dragged the bodies outside and began digging graves in the hard ground behind the house. It was grueling work in the heat, but it needed to be done. The desert might be harsh, but it was also forgiving in its own way. The dead would rest here, their secrets buried with them. As the sun began to set, Samuel finished his grim task. Cole had survived his wounds and was sitting by the water trough, watching the burial proceedings with hollow eyes. "What happens now?" Cole asked. Samuel wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Now you heal up and decide what kind of man you want to be. You can ride out of here and find another Morrison, or you can try to build something decent with what's left of your life." Cole nodded slowly. "And if I choose wrong, then you'll end up like your friends," Samuel said simply. The night was cool and clear, with stars visible from horizon to horizon. Samuel sat on his porch, cleaning his weapons and thinking about the day's events. He had killed before, would probably kill again if circumstances demanded it, but each time left its mark, adding another layer to the armor around his heart. Cole had fallen asleep by the fire, exhausted by his wounds and the day's trauma. Samuel watched him for a while, wondering if the man would choose redemption or revenge when morning came. It was a decision every man had to make for himself. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows across the yard. Samuel added another log, stirring the coals until they flared back to life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new tests of his resolve. But tonight, the Broken Arrow Ranch was peaceful, its guardian keeping watch over the darkness. As Samuel prepared to turn in for the night, he noticed Cole stirring restlessly by the fire. The wounded man's face was pale, his breathing labored. Samuel knelt beside him, checking the bandages. "Fever's setting in," Samuel murmured. "Infection, most likely." Cole's eyes fluttered open. "Am I dying?" "Maybe," Samuel said honestly. "Depends on how strong you are and how badly you want to live." Cole gripped Samuel's arm with surprising strength. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. Morrison, he said it would be easy money. Said we'd just scare some people. Maybe rough them up a little. But you knew it would be more than that," Samuel said. Cole nodded weakly. "Yeah, I knew. But I was scared. Broke. Figured I didn't have any other choice." Samuel stood and walked to the house, returning with a bottle of whiskey and clean bandages. "There's always a choice, son. Sometimes they're all bad choices. But there's still choices." He poured whiskey over Cole's wound, causing the man to cry out in pain. "This is going to hurt for a while. But if you survive the night, you might make it." Cole gritted his teeth against the pain. "Why are you helping me? I came here to kill you." "Because I've been where you are," Samuel replied. "Made some of the same mistakes, hurt people who didn't deserve it. The difference is, I got a chance to make things right." Through the long night, Samuel tended to Cole's wounds and listened to his rambling confessions. The man spoke of a childhood in poverty, of parents who died young, of a series of bad decisions that had led him to Morrison's gang. It was a familiar story in the territory, where desperation often drove men to violence. By dawn, Cole's fever had broken. He was weak but conscious, his eyes clearer than they had been the night before. Samuel helped him drink some water and eat a little bread. "I'm going to live," Cole said, almost surprised by the realization. "Looks like it," Samuel agreed. "Question is, what are you going to do with that life?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Never thought past tomorrow before." "Well, now you have to," Samuel said, "because tomorrow's going to keep coming, whether you're ready for it or not." Later that morning, as Samuel was preparing to help Cole onto his horse, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. A group of riders was approaching fast, too many to be casual travelers. Samuel's hand moved to his gun as he tried to count them. "Company," he said grimly. Cole struggled to his feet, fear evident in his eyes. "Morrison's people? Maybe. Or maybe word got out about what happened here." The riders resolved into a posse of 6 men, led by a figure Samuel recognized. Deputy Marshal Tom Williams, a man he had known for 20 years. Relief flooded through him as he realized these were lawmen, not more killers. "Sam," Williams called out as he reined in his horse. "Heard there was trouble out here. Smoke was spotted from town yesterday." Samuel nodded toward the fresh graves. 3 men came looking for a fight. They found one. Williams dismounted and examined the burial site. "Anyone I'd know?" Leader called himself Jack Morrison. Had 2 men with him, Cole and Dutch. "This one's Cole." Samuel indicated the wounded man. "He's the only one who survived." Williams studied Cole with professional interest. "Jack Morrison. Yeah, I know that name. Wanted for murder in New Mexico, robbery in Colorado. Been looking for him for months." "Well, you can stop looking," Samuel said. The marshal's men spread out, examining the scene and asking questions. Samuel answered them honestly, describing the gunfight and its aftermath. Cole corroborated his story, admitting his own role in the attempted murder. "What's going to happen to me?" Cole asked Williams. The marshal considered this. "Well, you're wounded, and from what I can see, you didn't actually shoot anyone. Mr. Garrett here speaks for your character, says you might be worth saving. I reckon that's worth something." Williams turned to Samuel. "You willing to take responsibility for this boy? Make sure he doesn't cause any more trouble?" Samuel looked at Cole, seeing something in the young man's eyes that reminded him of his own younger self. "I could use help around the ranch. Works honest, pays fair. But one wrong move and I'll put you in the ground myself. Cole nodded eagerly. I understand. I won't let you down. Williams seemed satisfied with this arrangement. All right then. Cole, you're on probation. You work for Mr. Garrett, you stay out of trouble, and maybe in a few years we can talk about a full pardon. As the posse prepared to leave, Williams pulled Samuel aside. You sure about this? That boy was riding with killers. So was I once upon a time, Samuel replied. Someone gave me a chance to change. Figure I owe the same to him. Williams nodded slowly. Just don't let compassion make you stupid, Sam. Some men can't be saved. And some can't be damned, Samuel countered. Only one way to find out which kind he is. After the lawmen left, Samuel and Cole settled into a routine. The younger man was weak from his wounds, but determined to prove himself. He helped with the lighter chores around the ranch, learning the difference between honest work and the violence that had defined his previous life. As the days passed, Samuel watched Cole carefully for signs of deception or hidden malice. But what he saw was a man genuinely trying to change, to build something better from the wreckage of his past. It was a familiar struggle, one that Samuel remembered well from his own transformation years earlier. The drought continued, but somehow the ranch endured. The few remaining cattle found enough grass to survive, and the well, though low, didn't run dry. Samuel began to think that maybe, just maybe, they would make it through another season. One evening, as they sat by the fire sharing a simple meal, Cole asked the question that had been weighing on him for weeks. Why did you really help me? The truth this time. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Because 20 years ago I was running with a gang not much different from Morrison's. We robbed stages, rustled cattle, killed anyone who got in our way. I thought I was tough, thought I was smart. Really, I was just scared and angry. What changed? Met a woman in Tucson, Sarah Mitchell. She was a teacher, had come west to help build schools in the new settlements. She saw something in me that I didn't know was there, convinced me that I could be more than just another killer. Cole waited, sensing there was more to the story. We got married, built this ranch together. She taught me to read, to think about tomorrow instead of just today. For 5 years, I was happier than I'd ever been. Samuel's voice grew quiet. Then the Apache came. I was in town getting supplies when they hit the ranch. By the time I got back, it was too late. I'm sorry, Cole said softly. Point is, she saved me when I didn't deserve saving. Now I'm trying to do the same for you. But you have to want it, have to be willing to fight for it every day. Cole nodded. I want it. I want to be better than what I was. Then you will be, Samuel said simply. The years that followed were hard, but good. Cole proved himself to be a quick learner and a dependable worker. The ranch slowly recovered from the drought, and new cattle were brought in to rebuild the herd. Samuel taught Cole everything he knew about ranching, about survival, about the delicate balance between justice and mercy that defined life on the frontier. Cole never forgot the lesson of that night by the fire, when Samuel's boots had stood empty beside the dying coals. Not because Samuel had vanished, but because he had chosen to stay, to fight, to build something lasting from the ashes of violence. It was a choice that defined both men for the rest of their lives. The Broken Arrow Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where troubled men could find redemption if they were willing to work for it. Samuel's reputation as a gunfighter faded, replaced by recognition as a man who could see past someone's worst moments to their potential for good. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the cattle were settled for the night, Samuel would sit on his porch and remember Sarah's words. Every man deserves a chance to be better than his past. It was a lesson worth living by, worth dying for, and worth passing on to the next generation of men who came seeking shelter in the vast, unforgiving beauty of the American frontier. The boots by the fire had told their own story that morning, one of a man who had chosen to stay and fight rather than disappear into the desert. It was a choice that echoed through the years, a testament to the idea that redemption was possible for anyone willing to reach for it, even in the hardest of times and the harshest of places.